Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. Currently in London this day. I leave next week going back to Asia, and so we'll have some more shows from Asia. But let's talk about India and Pakistan. What's going on? As we know, there's conflict around the world, and just as we're thinking we're trying to solve one conflict, another arises. So I'm very honored to have with us Keith Vaz today, the former UK Foreign Minister, one of the most distinguished British politicians that there is, a distinguished gentleman that I know. It's an honor to have you with us today. So let's get started. Help us understand why Indians and Pakistanis don't seem to like each other.
Well, first, can I say what a great pleasure it is being on your program, Dane. I'm a great fan of Dane Walters and his program, and it is amazing that I'm on with you here today. Well, it's very interesting because maybe next week you'll have a different pope from different continents. I was born in Yemen, in Aden. My parents are from Goa in India, and I'm living, and I have done, in the United Kingdom. So if there's a vacancy, though I think we'll have to wait about 10 years, maybe I could be considered. This particular issue has been going on for years and years, decades and decades, and it is a legacy of colonialism. This is, I'm afraid, and I say this as a former British MP and Foreign Office Minister, the legacy of what the United Kingdom did all over the world. When they retreated, they just divided. They thought the best way to deal with Kashmir was divided between India and Pakistan. So you have an Indian controlled Pakistan and a Pakistani controlled Kashmir. As a result of which, these two parts of Kashmir will always be at loggerheads. India regards this very much as its territory. And in the divvy upping of land, not quite Yalta, they should have really claimed the whole of it and been given the whole of it, because that is what India believes. The Kashmiris, of course, believe that they should be a completely independent country with their own president, their own flag, and their own control of their borders. And the Pakistanis believe they should control it. So this is always going to be a flashpoint in world affairs.
But listen, but help me understand. Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to British colonialism because I agree. If you look around the world, I love the UK. I live in the UK these days, but if you look at conflict around the world, I would argue that most of the conflict that we see, especially in Africa and other parts, is the artificial divvying up or dividing up of these regions. And I guess this is exactly what's happening in Kashmir. But I mean, this is a random question off the top of my head. We only have how many nuclear powers do we have in this world? Like five or six, and
Mhm.
yet India and Pakistan both have nuclear power or nuclear powers. How did that happen? How did both of those countries end up getting nuclear weapons?
I think at the end of the day, when you have a flashpoint of this kind and two incredibly strong countries in terms of international relations, they will go to their partners, and this becomes not quite a proxy war because these countries are too big to be proxies, but they will go to their friends and they will ask them for support and help. It's obviously India has had a very long relationship with Russia, and Indira Gandhi was the first prime minister, Nehru's prime minister before her, to go to Russia and to make that strong relationship. Even if you go to a place like Goa, my hometown, you see many Russian people coming to stay in Goa in India. Similarly, Pakistan has had a very strong relationship with China. And I suppose it's a case, Dane, of my enemy's enemy is my friend. And that is what has happened. So they have had no problem with building access to nuclear weapons. And that is why it's a dangerous flashpoint. And that is why this kind of problem created by the British, I know you don't want to go back and delve into history, but it's all over the world. If you look at the current Middle East, that was also a creation of a British government. It's the way you retreat. Biden's retreat from Afghanistan was let's all go tomorrow. Let's not divide it up. Let's just leave. That seems to be the American way after neo-colonialism. We'll go, we'll fight, we'll support our side, and when we're losing, we're just going to go. But the British do something quite differently, so-called British diplomacy from the Great Foreign Office, of which I was once a member. Let's sit down, negotiate, divide, and let's hope everything can be happy at the end. So this is a division on religious grounds, and that is what actually fuels a lot of the problems that we have.
Well, so yeah, so let's talk about the religious aspect of this. Pakistan, I guess, is primarily Muslim, correct? And then India is Hindu. Is that correct?
Yep.
Um, so how does let's talk about what the possibility of resolving this conflict. I mean, do you think it's going to escalate? Do you think it has the potential of being a nuclear war, or what's going to happen in your opinion?
Well, I have a view that everyone knows when to step back at the right time, but this is an odd time in world affairs, as you correctly said, as your program demonstrated. Look what even happened this week. You had massive trade deals with America, you have Trump in the White House, you have a pope being elected, all this stuff, you have the Middle East issue, Ukraine. I can't remember a time when so much was happening so fast and the agenda was changing so quickly. Your program each week must be absolutely filled with international affairs. You have no problem getting copy. This is not a quiet time in the world. Um, and that's why, in a sense, it's the fourth or fifth story on the list of stories if you look down websites, international websites, because I think at the end people do believe that this will have to be resolved. People will just have to get round the table and not solve the problem, but stop the fighting. Let's be clear, this has started because of aggression of terrorists who the Indian government say was supported by the Pakistani government, who entered Indian territory and killed people. And that is why it began. This is the whole context of what we're seeing. And we have to get back to a situation where the two countries will be drawing back. I think that's inevitable. I think there's no role for the UN. There was a time when in UK politics, I remember from my time in the House of Commons, when there used to be regular debates on Kashmir, and it got the Indians very irritated. What is British Parliament doing discussing solutions in Kashmir? It's got nothing to do with them. I think they're absolutely right. I think this is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. It requires, in a sense, a democratic government in Pakistan. The leader of their most popular party, the guy who in effect won the election, is sitting in prison, Imran Khan. I think when he was the prime minister, there was a much better relationship between the two countries. India is predominantly, of course, Hindu, but it doesn't claim to be a Hindu state in the same way as Pakistan's name includes Islamic Republic. So there is actually quite a big divide. And it is important that everyone understands there are no winners out of all this. At the end of the day, people will need to sit down and call a truce.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, the problem is we as we've talked about, there's not that much strong leadership around the world to kind of help foster peace. But what about the timing? Why would if this say that the Pakistanis were behind the terrorist attack? Why now? Why would they do it now? And why would they provoke the Indian government now?
Well, I suppose if you accept that they were, this is a better time more than any time to do this because it distracts people from, Wag the Dog. Do you remember that film?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, my God, we're really behind in the opinion polls. Let's go to war.
yeah.
I don't know whether this is true or not, but maybe that's when they decided to do it. Um, Obviously, the Indian government does not make claims that are not substantiated. I think they have evidence to support their claims that there was support. And one of the ways in which you can dispel support is as soon as something like this happens, you come right out with a very clear statement and you say, you were not involved in this at all, and you condemn the attacks that were made on tourists in Kashmir. And you're very clear about it. I think one of the problems is that the Pakistani government has missed the boat in terms of a ringing and thorough denunciation of what happened, because in the back of their minds, there is always this kind of conflict. Maybe that's when the Pakistani prime minister should have flown over to Delhi or met in a neutral place, Nepal, Bhutan, somewhere like that, somewhere quite close, Sri Lanka. And they go, look, let's meet and let's find out together who was responsible for this. That's what you do when there is terrorism. You don't equivocate. You come up very firmly and you say, I didn't do this. Whoever it is, we're going to help you find these people and we're going to bring them to justice because terrorism cannot be tolerated anywhere.
It's interesting you say that. So I didn't even recognize that and realize that. So the Pakistani government has not denied that their involvement in this.
Well, as far as I'm aware, there's not the unequivocal statement that one would require. This is not just any old conflict. This is an age-old conflict that goes back for decades and decades. This is, as I say, a result of Lord Mountbatten sitting there with his pencil and dividing up, India, as they have done in Africa. The great powers, the French, the Spanish, the Belgians, and the British, sat down and they divided up Africa. That's why you have certain countries like North Africa, as you will know, under the influence of the French. Some have kicked them out. You have other countries like East Africa, more friendly to the British. Though at the moment, I think none of the African countries are going to be particularly friendly to their former colonial powers. So come out with that statement. Fly over to bring up, ring Modi up and say, we were not behind this. We condemn terrorism. Let's meet. Let's come together. But there isn't that kind of interest in doing so. And I think that's a big mistake on behalf of the Pakistani government. They should be doing this, and they should be doing it fast.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But so public opinion both in Pakistan and India. I mean, do Indians and Pakistanis care a lot about Kashmir, or is it more of a the fight between the Pakistan and India versus Kashmir itself?
You'll have to ask someone who is of Pakistani origin for that. As someone of Indian origin, if you've ever attended an India versus Pakistan match, you'll know, cricket match, you will know it's great if our conflicts could be decided by cricket, and the winner will then take all. You will realize the real partisanship that exists. That's why leaders have a responsibility to get on with each other. And I think the Pakistani Prime Minister should have moved much more swiftly to do this, because this is an age-old dispute that's not going to work. I mean, as a constituency MP in a place like Leicester for 32 and a half years, probably all your life, Dane, I don't know how old you are, but
25. I'm 25 years old. Don't I look it?
so for all your life, I've been an MP. I was an MP in Leicester East. I had people who were Pakistanis who wanted to visit India, and they wouldn't. They had to go through rigorous checks, as one would expect, because of the issues that are involved. Even the sons and the grandsons and the granddaughters had to do the same. So there is this suspicion. So why not try and resolve this matter? Why not try and, make it very clear we were not behind it and this is how it's going to change? Who will be the power broker in all this? I think America is too distracted. America has not spent enough time courting relations between Pakistan and India. As we know, the Obama administration landed, took out Osama bin Laden, and left, much to the fury of the Pakistanis. They may or may not have known what was going on. We don't know, but they were certainly furious. They don't really have that relationship. Modi and Trump do. They seem to have a very good chemistry between them. Their politics is very similar. But of course, the tariff war is going to affect that relationship. All this talk about free trade deals and all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, what matters is how much is it going to cost? And as you know, your president, Dane, because you are still an American, you're not yet the Pope, but you're still an American. Your president is very parochial. He wants to put America first and make America great again. So everything is in the interest of America.
Listen, I think I look good. I don't think I look good with that little Pope hat on. I think I would look good with it,
You would look better than Trump. I'm sorry, there's no vacancy. The throne of St. Peter has been filled, and there has never
It's
been a third
temporary.
Dane.
It's temporary. I'm going to put myself out there to the conclave. I'm next. Okay. You and I will compete for it. So that's what we'll do. But the UK and India just signed a big piece. I mean, trade deal supposedly. Depends on who you talk to whether it's good or bad. But all
Yeah,
that being said, so does Starmer have the Prime Minister have any relationship with Modi to help with this situation? Do you think?
not good enough. He needs to have a much better relationship. if I had been elected prime minister, since you think you're going to be pope, let me pose for 1 minute if I was prime minister. I wouldn't make my first trip to Paris or go to Washington. I would go straight to New Delhi because that is where our strongest relationship should be. For years and years, they've been trying to broker this deal. Obviously, Keir Starmer should get the credit for signing the deal, but I think this has happened because Trump has been elected president and because of the tariffs, because of the way in which he has so successfully used the media in order to frighten every country in the world, other countries are now making these deals. Where it comes to in the end, I don't know, because our Jaguar Land Rover, which we claim is a British company, is obviously owned by India. It's owned by Tata. British Steel and large chunks of it were owned by China before it was taken partly into public ownership. So much of Britain has actually been sold off already before we've got to this position. So it's interesting to see what the deal is, but we should congratulate Keir Starmer on what he's done. He's brought it over the line. Obviously, previous government has been working on it too. Credit to everybody. But let's see what happens in the end, because one of the big concerns people have is on migration. And everyone says they don't want more migrants coming in. This trade deal will, of course, bring in more Indians. And there's nothing wrong with them because they will be highly skilled Indians. After all, look at your industries in California, Silicon Valley. They're all mostly all the big ones are run by Indians. So the key thing is the best export India has is actually its talented people. There is a brain drain going on, and people are coming to the UK and wanting to support what is happening there, which is good.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left. Let me just ask you this. So going back to India and Pakistan, I mean, what do you think is, let's talk about the governments, because I really honestly around the world, I've been to India several times. I've never been to Pakistan, one of the few countries I haven't been to. But you referred to earlier that basically that India is a democracy and Pakistan is not. I mean, is that a fair statement in your opinion?
Well, I think it's a every time we get to a stage where we're going to have a democratically elected government, such as under Imran Khan, who is massively popular, the army moves in. I think it's not a secret, Dane. I'm not releasing some new information to your program, but the military control Pakistan in the same way as they don't control India. And that is a truism. I don't think the Pakistanis will deny it. Ask any Pakistani in Leicester or in London and Bradford, they will tell you that. And they're against that. They would like to see a democratic government being brought in, a fully democratic government, which will be able to respond to the needs of the people. You ask anyone. When you
No,
go
no,
to your next shop,
yeah, yeah.
they will tell you the same thing.
No, I agree with that. I mean, my experience, just from what I know about Pakistan, I mean, Khan is in prison. I mean, they just like to imprison people in Pakistan who are in many ways kind of anti-military or maybe pro-democracy. And that's what scares me about. And I'm not taking a position on India versus Pakistan, but I do think that there's a greater check and balance on nuclear powers if there's a democracy, in my opinion. So that's what concerns me more than anything. So one last question for you. Um, do you think Kashmir itself? Do you think India and Pakistan, do you think there's any chance that Kashmir will ever be totally independent? And would India and Pakistan be happy if that happened?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll happen. I am now 68. I'm a year younger than the Pope. It's the first. I was worried about popes being elected since you mentioned it, that I was getting very old because the popes were getting younger than me. But luckily, the Pope is actually 7 months older than me. So I'm not going to see the day when that's going to happen. India has a strong claim on Kashmir. It believes essentially it is part of India and it wants to be part of India, and it feels that it could be part of that democracy. And of course, there is a different religion that is in a majority there, and that's why it's essential to show the breadth and diversity of India. And they will fight tooth and nail, the Indian government, to make sure it remains part of India. I'm not sure that same appetite is on the side of the Pakistanis. I think it's probably a case of, well, if they want it, we're going to have it as well. As for the Kashmiris themselves, I think they want a democratic, prosperous government so they can flourish. When you visit, you will find, I've never visited Kashmir, but I've heard that it's one of the most beautiful parts of India. And if when you visit, you will see how wonderful it is. And I think that, um, but I don't think we'll get peace in our time, which is a shame. And I think this will go on for some time to come.
Well, I lied. I have one last question for you, Keith, because you are a global expert. You know what's going on around the world.
I want you to know about that.
Well, you do, one of my things, and we talk a lot about in the show, is just, in my opinion, the lack of global leadership or strong leaders around the world, democratic leaders, that's kind of leading to a lot of the wars and conflict that we're seeing. What is your, just overall, what is your take on what's happening around the world, just generically right now?
Mm. It's a very odd circumstance. There are very strange elections taking place in different parts of the world. Who would have thought that a Liberal would have been elected Prime Minister of Canada 3 months ago? Who would have thought that Trump would have won? I'm just finishing a book about Trump's election. Even he didn't think particularly that he was going to win the election. The electorate is making its mind up. It's partly to do with social media. People are making their minds on the basis of what they see. And I think that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, charismatic leadership is extremely important. And people like strong leaders. They don't like weak leaders. They don't like their countries being humiliated. They like that strongly. I think this is the era of the strong man, of Putin, of Trump, of Modi, maybe even of the Pope. Maybe behind that smile is a steel that we haven't seen as yet. Who knows? Who would have thought that Pope Francis would turn out to be what he turned out to be, or John Paul II, my favorite pope, I have to say, turned out to be so amazing. So this is a very interesting time. What is one thing is absolutely sure: your program is going to be filled brim to brim every single week. You are not going to be short of stories, Dane, and that's a good thing for a journalist.
Well, Keith, you're very kind. You're very kind with your words. I appreciate that. But anyway, it's a great honor to have you on the show. I look forward to having you on the show again in the future, and we'll talk to you soon. You take care.
Thank you,
Um,
Dane.
Thanks for being with Around the World with Dane Waters. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back with our next guest. Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. I say this every time. I always say, Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters, as if somehow, and my picture's even on the marquee, as if people don't know. I don't know. I need to change that. I really do. Anyway, we're welcome, Lubna. How are you? It's a pleasure to have you here
Good. Thank you
today.
so much.
Now,
Thank
is
you
it
so much for
Jerar? How do you say
it's
Jerar?
Jerar.
Lubna Jerar.
Yeah.
I have to roll that out. Jerar. Does that sound about right? Yeah. I'm from
Yeah.
Alabama. I can't. My last guest last week, he was Peruvian, and I couldn't roll my R's, so I apologize for that. Well, welcome, Lubna. This is a continuation. This show is been about India and Pakistan and what's going on. Our first guest was the former Foreign Minister of the UK, Keith Vaz. We were talking. I mean, he's of Indian descent, so I would argue that he's probably definitely has a more a thought process about the Indians. But you're in Pakistan, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm in Pakistan right now.
And you are, I guess you're tell us a little bit about you. So your title is you're involved in journalism, truth in journalism, I believe.
I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for 30 years now. I've also done fact checking. I'm a media trainer, and I'm also part of International Federation of Journalists. I'm the first woman general secretary of my union. That's Karachi Union of Journalists. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, maybe you can give me some media training because I definitely need it. My producer tells me every week I need to do something a little bit better. So maybe you can help me with that. But let's get to this serious situation, India and Pakistan, the conflict. So in your opinion, what is going on between the two countries and why is it happening in your opinion?
Things are really, really bad right now. Pakistan and India have always had a love-hate relationship. We've shared history, but since 1947, Pakistan was created out of India. We share a lot of history, a lot of culture, but there's always tension, and especially over Kashmir, because Kashmir was dominantly a Muslim area when we were going into towards partition. And it's always been a bone of contention between the countries. And recently there was an attack on the tourist over there. 26 people died, unfortunately, in India. From Pakistan's point of view, I can tell you we've been victims of terrorism for I think, quarter of a century now. And despite India being our rival in a way, in most ways, we really, really do condole and condemn every terrorist attack or act anywhere in the world, especially in this region, because and whether we like each other or not, India, Pakistan, our neighbors, anything that happens here, we share everything. We have to be in the good and bad together. Been talking to a lot of Indian journalists, and everybody wants peace here. That's what we're hearing. Right now, on May 7th, early morning, there was an unfortunate incident when the Indian aircrafts came into our territory. Pakistan retaliated. Their planes, fighter jets were shot down. Since then, in the last 4 days, 77 drones have entered Pakistan's airspace, and Pakistan has fortunately contained them before any damage was done. Pakistanis are right now quite, they're of course being very patriotic, and we're very emotional in South Asia. But we would want to have peace here. We are trying to project that everywhere, so on social media, through traditional media. Even our leadership is being very, very, they're trying to, work on peace. So it's an unfortunate issue.
Let me ask this. My previous guest made this comment that the Pakistani government, I have two questions here. One is that after the incident, the Pakistani government did not come out and vehemently deny that they were involved. That's number one. I don't know if that's true or not. You can tell our guest if that's true or not. The second thing is, the accusation is that the Pakistani government was behind the terrorists who attacked in Kashmir. How would you respond to those two questions?
Well, for the first part, I think most of our political leaders and the public were condemning this online, and the unfortunate thing. The Prime Minister didn't openly come out and condemn it. We were having this discussion in Pakistan, and a lot of the people on social media were demanding that, because at that point we had no idea that it would be blamed on Pakistan. And within 30 minutes, we find out that Pakistan has been is responsible for this attack. And from the beginning, our government and anybody who can talk to the Indian side has been asking for evidence. We were saying, at least give us evidence. If not, let's get some third-party investigators inside. Let's investigate this. We're open to an investigation. I think we need to learn the language of peace. Blatantly giving conclusions within short spans can cause a lot of problems in a place where there's already a lot of sensitivity. Pakistan is already engaged on its western border. And it wouldn't be very advisable at this point to, open other places for any kind of confrontation. Pakistan was taken aback. I mean, we do sometimes, I think Pakistan, India does expect us to be blamed for each other's issues, but it was too rapid. In 30 minutes, they had kind of concluded it was Pakistanis. And now 3 days later, we're hearing their authorities asking the tourists and other people who were there at the point, they're asking for evidence, if they have any video evidence, if they have any other, witnesses over there. So that kind of makes us think, you should have at least taken some time, done some investigation. This is very difficult.
But I hate to interrupt you, but is the Pakistani government actually doing an investigation themselves, other than calling on India to provide proof? Is the Pakistani government trying to provide proof that it wasn't, and that it was and if it wasn't who are these terrorists to begin with? I mean, is it a known terrorist organization, or are these just, when they use the term terrorist, or is it a norm? I mean, what do we know about the terrorist? Anything?
As far as I know, I don't think anybody's claimed responsibility for this. And most of the witnesses that we've been watching and hearing, they've turned around and said, stop making this into a religious thing, because Muslims and Hindus, Pakistan's predominantly Muslim. Anything that happens in over there, they say Muslims are behind this and Pakistan's behind this. So even the people who survived there, they were trying to build a narrative. These people are not Muslims, and they were trying to explain to the world that this has nothing to do with religion. As India was in the beginning, we heard that the terrorist came and said who's Muslim, who's Hindu, and singled out the Hindus, and then unfortunately murdered them. But there were a couple of Kashmiri local Muslims there, so even the Kashmiris are asking on that side of the border that don't do this. This is not a religious war, and this has nothing to do for and it's unfortunate that we use religion a lot in this region, because that's how you can build very strong narratives, and people will automatically, I think, listen to more that you're saying and without question. And that's unfortunate. Even now, 3 days later, we're seeing a lot of credible journalists who we hope would have spoken some sense there. We do not want war. I don't think any country in this world wants war. And Pakistan and India shares so many things. We shared natural resources, and Pakistanis were very, very, they were very, they're understanding that there's been a tragedy there. But when Prime Minister Modi said that, well, we're going to suspend the Indus Treaty, it's water. It's supposed to be a shared natural resource. That's where the anger in Pakistan, or maybe the reaction came, and it was suddenly a tragedy, and suddenly now you're saying that a country is going to be deprived of its main water source. So I think the leaders should be very sensitive when they're talking or even dealing with a tragedy. Unfortunately, it's a loss of lives, and Pakistan never supports. Pakistan public and the government does not support any tragic event, and having suffered so many. We've lost more than 55,000 people in terrorism. We've lost children. We know what it feels like losing people to terrorism. Often
but let me ask this:
about,
just because the people, I mean, this is my, this whole show's about governments around the world and all that kind of stuff. I agree with you. The people themselves suffer. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But what about the government? Do you think the government care? I mean, I'm not taking a position between India and Pakistan, to be very clear. I'm not taking a position on that. But I understand people like you, and I do have other Pakistani friends who were nice enough to help introduce me to you, and I understand that whole situation about, hey, we don't like war, we don't want terrorism. But what about the government? I mean, I do find it very odd that the prime minister did not immediately come out and condemn it. What happened, whether they were part of it or not, I think that's quite striking. But I'm not casting aspersions, but it is very striking. But do the Pakistani people like their government? Does the Pakistani people respect their government? I mean, I know there's a lot of concern about, Imran Khan in prison and all of this, but would you argue, and I know that it's a very sensitive subject because you are in Pakistan, but is the Pakistani government, in your opinion, considered to be a democracy?
well, we are striving for democracy, and I think we haven't got there yet. But the government, people, they have a love-hate relationship with the government. I mean, we've been polarized after Imran Khan came, and the younger generation is more towards Imran Khan. And Punjab, which is the largest, I think, a place where the government is decided because it's a bigger province. The population there generally is behind their representatives there. The Sharifs have they're business-minded people, and they usually they bring better economics here and better trade here. They're talking about bringing trade, bringing in investment. So it'll take time for us to settle down and back any one government. We're always, we're very opinionated, and a lot of passion is involved in politics here. So I wouldn't say we're all supporting our government all the time, but right now we are. That's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, well, we only this is actually, well, sadly, I'm out of time, but I'm going to ask you one last question. Do you believe, and we have like 30 seconds here, do you believe that this is going to escalate? Do you think that the government there, but the Indian government have a desire to stop this, or are you afraid that it's going to escalate?
We're fearing the worst, and we're hoping that both governments see sense in we're working towards peace. India doesn't seem to be very happy to go towards peace right now, but Pakistan is still trying to work towards peace. But that's not because I'm a Pakistani. We're seeing our government and the establishment trying to get the international eyeballs here, try to make somebody mediate between the countries because we need peace in this region.
Well, listen, I hope there is peace. There's too much conflict in the world. We all want peace, but not at the price of capitulation, is like I always like to say. But Lubna, it's been a great pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again in the future. And stay safe. Thank you for joining Dane Waters with Around the World with Dane Waters, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.
You know, and Around the World with Dane Waters, what we talk about is how the world is constantly changing and evolving, and events just happen in split seconds. Now, we just had a very nice show, two amazing guests, where we talked about what was going on in India and Pakistan. And since the show has finished, things have already changed. Luckily that there's a ceasefire in India and between India and Pakistan. Why that happened, it's up to a lot of people's guess, but there was word on the street that Pakistan was considering using some type of nuclear weapons, and the things would be escalating quickly out of hand. And so it became very evident that something needed to be done to bring truce. And I'm glad. We live in a world of conflict. We live in a world of war. And the last thing we needed was a nuclear war between India and two of the largest nuclear powers in the world, between India and Pakistan. So we're very grateful for that. But also what's interesting is that from the show, as I said, I had two amazing guests. But when we had the guest from Pakistan, she was very limited in what she could say because of the possibility that the government was listening to her conversation. So we still live in a world where freedom and democracy is not rampant around the world, and actually it's in retreat, especially given what America is doing these days and kind of abandoning, in my opinion, their responsibilities globally, especially in places like Ukraine. Anyway, I'll see you next week, but just so you know, the world is fast-paced, the world is changing, and we all need to pay attention to what's happening, because before we know it, all the freedoms that we have could be gone. Thanks again for watching Around the World with Dane Waters, and I'll talk to you soon.